You add everything, which is now part of the framework. You can also take things away from that frame. You can also use things more in that framework than other things. So it is a framework. And so you can always add to it. Now, this past year, we were able to actually add these particular 5 things that's at the bottom to our framework. So because of everything that happened in the pandemic and everything, we wanted to make it more purposeful. So we actually added trauma-informed care education. So every single month, our teachers had a PD on trauma-informed care, which actually helped them with administering positive behaviors and with their instruction. We had the creation and implementation of our first tier 2 intervention. We had actually 2, check in and check out and breaks are better. You have some scholars that need that extra intensive attention. So they have to have a mentor. They have to be put in a position where they actually can take a break. A lot of us don't even understand when you take a break, there's actually a process to taking a break. When you tell a child to go get water, they're not just getting water. Think about it. They're upset. They're de-escalating. They're walking down the hallway. They're thinking about what they're doing. They're actually drinking the water and they're still thinking about, hey, okay, before I go back in this class, I'm going to behave. Now they're walking back. They're taking deep breaths. They're figuring out, okay, when I go back in, this happened before. Now this is not going to happen now. It's a whole process, but we actually put them in a position where breaks are better to actually learn what they are going through that particular process. And remember, any and everything that we do as far as a tier 2 intervention, there's always an exit out strategy. Behavior reporting. First time that we utilize it with fidelity, I would say. It's not the first time we use it. First time we utilize it with fidelity. We applied live school with a purpose. Almost the same thing. And what I mean by that is, when I was head of my academy, I was one of the few people that was using live school with fidelity and really implementing to my academy. Last year was the first time that it was school-wide. So that was the great thing that we actually added to our framework this past year. And for the first time, we actually incorporated the social work team as part of the PBIS and MTSS teams. So that was actually 5 pluses that we were able to do this past year and add to our framework. And
hey, Paul, real quick before you go on. Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off. That piece on tier 2, I think that's a piece that a lot of schools, they kind of fail to systemize that. And what you're talking about, because you had 2 specific programs that you guys could get really good at. I think that's a big deal. That how did you guys go about choosing? Well, how'd you get there?
So the check in, check out, that was kind of me. And what I mean by that is, in my former location, I was actually the check in, check out coordinator. And so I implemented to a smaller level already in my academy, where I set up mentors throughout my academy. So when we selected certain scholars, we put them on check in, check out, and we just had them talk to their mentor at the beginning of the day. And we actually had them have a chart. So each period, 45 minutes, they would get a score of 0, 1 to 3. 3 met all my goals, 2 met some of them, 1 didn't really meet the requirements, 0 didn't meet any of them. And so we set up that they had to meet 80% of their goals. So if they had 8 periods throughout the day, they could get 3 points for each period. So that's 24 points. Let's just say they get 18 out of 24 points. Well, that's only 75%. So that means they didn't meet their goal. But after meeting their goal, after a 6-week period, we will revisit to see if this is an intervention that is still viable for this particular scholar, and then we will exit them out. So I was already doing that in my academy. When it was time for us to implement a tier 2 intervention, that was almost like perfect. It was almost like perfect. And the way we adapted or differentiated for the lower school, instead of giving points, we give smiley faces. We give a smiley face, we give a plain face, we give a frown face, and things like that. And yes, we do give a frown face. And yes, we do give zeros. We want the scholars to actually see, hey, in 5th period in Ms. Johnson's class, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And we also want their parents to know, because their parents are a stakeholder. And be honest with you, we can't do nothing without parental support. We want their parents to know, hey, this particular child at 5th grade is having problems with Ms. Johnson's class. What can we do about this? So that was one intervention. The other one was breaks are better. It came up in the conversation with the PBIS team that check in, check out wasn't going to work for everybody. And some scholars just needed a little break. Some scholars just needed hey, I need 5 minutes. Let me go sit over at this table and let me go color, or let me go read a book, or let me just go on the computer or anything like that. So we felt as though that there were some scholars that just needed that level of intervention. And we get them 2 a day. We give them 2 a day. And a lot of times, scholar-centered decision-making, they get to choose when they take their 2 breaks. They get to choose. So we give them passes and everything. So they give their teacher their first pass, and it says, hey, break number 1 on the pass. And then we give them their second pass. And so that's how it works. And once again, it's an exit strategy once again for that. So that's how that came about. And I can't wait for this year to start, because we started in January of last year because we were still recouping from the pandemic. And so this year we're already established. We already have the foundation. The great part, we just had a conversation yesterday about what scholars are going to be chosen. And my thing was, okay, let's keep in mind what scholars can be chosen, but let's not choose any scholars, because scholars mature and change over the summer before they return to school in September. So that was the conversation we just had yesterday. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's a piece I think that a lot of schools kind of get hung up on, because they get to that point where they're implementing MTSS and they just that the plan there is less concrete, and kind of by nature of the situations too.
Right. Exactly. So for global greatness, what steps did we take to make global greatness? Just yesterday, I met with my PBIS team, and we were just talking about all the great things that we have done, but it wasn't easy for us to get to this point. What we had to do, once again, it keeps coming up. Who are we as a school? So I just now alluded to the fact that we called it global greatness because we wanted to highlight who we are as a school. So the name, the tagline, Scholars with Integrity, we actually had a 2-day conversation of what do we want our scholars to do in this program? And it was so many words, so many names and everything. So we want them to be responsible. We want them to be respectful, and go back to that word. We want them to be safe. The poster design, we are called the Global Academy Gators. So that's why you see the alligator. His name is Globy, our mascot. So we wanted Globy to be highlighted throughout, so the children can always identify with it. It's almost the measure of children can read before they actually can read. Like a one-year-old knows what the golden arches look like. They really do, which is a form of reading. So we want our scholars to know, hey, in this particular space at this particular time, I see Globy, and Globy's saying something. I don't know exactly what he's saying, but it's actually attracting my mind to it. But I know that this is a safe place in this particular part of the building. And we want to identify systems to document behaviors. Right now, for our Tier 1 behaviors, we have a system affectionately known as Live School for documenting Tier 1 behaviors. And Level 2 and Level 3 behaviors, we do have a tracking behavior system called Branching Minds. We actually use both systems when we're aggregating data throughout. It helps us immensely. For instance, if we see a spike in 5th grade behaviors, we can pinpoint what time the behaviors are taking place, where the behaviors are taking place, and everything like that. And we actually can look at those behaviors, and we can actually come up with different interventions to rectify those particular behaviors. Now, with Live School on an in class, let's just say it's a scholar getting up out of his seat. And let's just say there's a scholar that got 20 points for the day and another scholar that got 11 points for the day. You can actually ask, hey, why did this scholar get 11 points for the day? And a teacher might say, hey, if you look at the record, because they keep giving up out of their seat. One thing that we did do in Live School, we stopped giving negative points. Because of once again, meeting our students where they are, there were too many students that became very temperamental when they would hear that womp 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 sound, or they would see that red come up. But we felt as though that when they're bringing home their checks to their parents, that their parents have to have the whole story. So we are still documenting quote unquote negative behaviors, but the scholars are not losing money for it. So that was one thing that we decided last school year. So the first thing we did was create an implementation team. We did that. Second thing we did was we designed a matrix to design expected behaviors in specific areas of the school. As you can see on here, the different areas are dismissal space, Harambe, hallways, bathroom, technology. As you can see, we added virtual. This was not here 3 years ago. We actually added it because we do have expectations when the scholars are learning on the computer that they're supposed to model and they're supposed to follow. Other areas that are not highlighted are the cafe, the schoolyard, the auditorium, bus, and the community. And as you can see on this example, actually, this is actually the actual document, but we list what the expected behaviors are for responsibility. Let's just take the bathroom. We actually list the behaviors where they are shown respect when they are using the bathroom facility, and we actually show how they are being safe when they are using the bathroom facility. Now, we actually have posters in the bathroom that states all these things. So if a scholar is ever confused, they actually have the information right at their disposal. So these matrices are actually hung up in different parts of the school. So people can always read it, can always refresh, and they can always learn from it. Like I said, this is foundational. This is something that all we have to do is revisit and tweak and say, hey, this is not working. Harambe was not there 3 years ago. A teacher called me up and said, Mr. Kennedy, I think we need a slot for Harambe because the scholars are doing what they're supposed to do during Harambe. And he also said they should receive a point for doing what they're supposed to be doing during Harambe. So I took this back to the PBIS team and we actually made that update. We have lesson plans for every single place in the building. This is our auditorium norms. When we're having our restorative circles or our morning meetings, the teacher can revisit and they have these in a handbook and it's right at their disposal. Now, teachers are teachers. A lot of these lesson plans, they're just, foundational. They're just quote unquote frameworks for them. So when they're looking at them and everything, they could say, hey, how can I make this lesson, align this with my class or align this with what I'm teaching in class? So we're just basically giving them the template and all they're doing is following the template. We also ask our teachers when they're teaching these lesson plans sometimes to actually go to the place in the building where they actually want to use this particular lesson plan. So if they're teaching the auditorium norms, we actually request that the teachers transition their children to the auditorium to teach this particular lesson. So the students can actually see the space that they're supposed to be learning about. Next, after we did that, we created an acknowledgement board. So this is our acknowledgement matrix. I'm just going to give an example. So the target population is all scholars. What's the type of acknowledgement? Live school points. Well, how do you get the live school points? Following school-wide expectations. Who, where is it? Is given by all settings, by all staff. What is the frequency? Well, the frequency is every single day. And who's the coordinator needed by the admin or the climate manager. So we have this throughout. We have about 4 pages of acknowledgement matrices. Some teachers do not have to follow this to a T. However, once again, it's providing them a template, but we try to just uniform everything across the school, across the board. So that's another thing that we had to do. And last but not least, we had to define behaviors. So we have each behavior that is a level 1 occurrence, a level 2 occurrence, and a level 3 occurrence. So once again, if you're going to branching minds and somebody in branching minds and you make it a level 2 occurrence because somebody is eating in your class, we might sit there and tell a teacher like, hey, we understand how it could be affecting your learning. However, this is probably a level 1 occurrence and you probably should document this in live school. So that's one thing. Sometimes we get pushed back, most of the time we don't. And so with the behaviors, however, we just always want the teachers to know that it should always be restorative, should always shift the mindset. The consequences should be logical. For instance, if a scholar gets upset and they break a pencil, then they should replace that pencil. If they have to take a break, whether there's loss of privileges, but the consequence should match whatever behavior that the scholar actually performs. So after we learn all that, we now are ready to take over the world.